This episode is brought to you by That Gosh Darn Hippie Show. Featuring music from the days of vinyl, it's the grooviest thing to hear on your radio. Greetings, mortals. Welcome to another session of the Infernal Court in Musical Hell. I'm Diva, your judge, jury, executioner, and spirited Victorian lady. It's Oscar season again, and we all know what that means. Lots of pomp and circumstance over movies that, when all is said and done, may or may not actually represent the best movies of the year. It's no secret that the Academy has made some poor choices for Best Picture nominations in the past. Crash, anyone? Many of them fueled more by aggressive studio campaigns than anything else. Case in point, our next offender, Dr. Dolittle. The first of several movies inspired by Hugh Lofting's books about the renowned veterinarian and animal linguist not only holds the distinction of being one of the worst movies ever nominated for the Best Picture Oscar, thanks to extensive bribery from 20th Century Fox, it's also one of the most notoriously troubled productions in film history. The large cast of animals created an enormous amount of both predictable and unexpected problems, from the nasty odor created by several varieties of excrement, to set pieces being eaten by squirrels, to star Rex Harrison getting urinated on by sheep and having his groin stomped on by a giraffe. Weather on location was terrible at both St. Lucia and Castle Combe, and the locals in the latter location were so irritated by the production's presence that one man actually tried to blow up part of the set. As for Harrison himself, we'll get to that. Let's examine the case of Dr. Dolittle. Our story takes place in the aggressively picturesque and extremely Britishly named Puddleby-on-the-Marsh in the year of our opposition, 1845. Here we meet Matthew Mugg, an itinerant pet food salesman, and young Tommy Stubbins, who I fear is going to be our annoying kid for the movie.
Thank you, Charlie. May the 17 holy men of Donnybrook reward you in heaven.
I'd sooner you rewarded me down here.
If Matthew were any more Irish, he'd be decorating in Old Chicago on St. Patrick's Day. After rescuing an injured duck from becoming a fisherman's dinner, Matthew explains to Tommy that he's taking the animal to John Dolittle, the world's foremost animal doctor and, according to Matthew's song, a real swell guy.
My friend the doctor says the moon is made of apple pie, and once a month it's eaten by the sun. And that is why up in the sky you'll find as every month goes by, somebody in the sky is making another one.
This first song makes Dolittle sound like he's clinically insane or Willy Wonka, which, to be fair, amounts to the same thing. At the doctor's house, we meet what amounts to an entire nativity's worth of livestock and Dolittle himself.
Well, if I find it, Matthew, I'm going to want to talk to it. Therefore, I have to acquire a knowledge of ancient shellfish, which is extremely complicated.
Is it possible for someone to communicate entirely in mansplain? Rex Harrison as Dr. Dolittle is sin number one on multiple levels. First, there's his characterization, which is basically a Henry Higgins retread. But while the brusque, arrogant, and self-absorbed thing worked for Higgins, it makes Dolittle colder and more unpleasant than he should be. And yes, part of his backstory is that he's an animal doctor because he was terrible with his human patients, but honestly his bedside manner with animals isn't much better.
Gub Gub. Will you please stop making that infernal noise? A few pork sausages and a bit of bacon. The way you're carrying on, anyone would think we were cooking your entire family.
Yeah, there's this entire song where Dolittle goes on about how he's a vegetarian. Understandable, as it's considered bad form to eat your clients, but a good chunk of the song is about how he really resents it and wishes he could tuck into a good ham sandwich.
I'm a cheat. I love meat. I'm a cheat. Yes, I am. I love red-blooded, juicy chunks of meat, legs of lamb, sides of beef, and chops and steaks and veal, and pork, of course, my favorite meal.
And then there's the matter of Rex Harrison himself. As difficult as the animal cast was for this movie, its human star was even worse. He made ridiculous demands on the producers, deliberately ruined a take by sailing his yacht into the scene, was openly jealous of co-star Anthony Newley and demanded his part be reduced, and made anti-Semitic comments about the Jewish Newley and racist comments to Jeffrey Holder. No wonder producer Arthur Jacobs had a heart attack during filming. Over dinner, Dolittle explains how he came to be in his current profession. He started out treating humans, but his fascination with the animal kingdom drove away his sister and also all of his patients, who strangely enough didn't take too well to vermin crawling all over them during consultations.
I'm a terrible doctor. I'm probably the worst doctor in the world.
No shit, Sherlock.
Dolittle's parrot, Miss Polynesia, suggests that Dolittle should provide his services to the local wildlife. As it happens, she's also a bit of a C-3PO when it comes to animal linguistics, and offers to teach him to do the same. Dolittle relishes the idea so much, he launches into the movie's most famous song.
I would converse in polar bear and python, and I would curse in fluent kangaroo.
I'm going to call this sin number 2, not for the song itself, but for the fact that Rex Harrison immortalized it. Singing has never been Harrison's strong suit, and again that worked for Henry Higgins, a role that's focused more on eloquent lyrics than melody. But while Talk to the Animals does have some cute wordplay going on, it also has a bright and bouncy tune that, unfortunately, we don't get to hear because the song is recited more than sung. At least Sammy Davis Jr. got to provide a more lyrical rendition.
If we could talk to the animals and learn their languages, maybe take an animal degree, I'd study elephant and eagle, a buffalo and beagle, a alligator, guinea pig and flea.
We also spend a lot of time watching Dolittle learning animal language, and Rex Harrison coming up and introducing himself to various fauna isn't nearly as interesting as the movie thinks it is. And the ending of the song is just braggy and shouty rather than joyous.
I can walk with the animals, talk with the animals, grunt and squeak and squawk with the animals.
His backstory complete, Dolittle gets back to his current project, which is searching for a creature called the Great Pink Sea Snail. But first we get to see a day in the life of the world's most famous animal doctor, giving pills to cows and straightening mice tails, and I can't take it anymore.
It's dull. Dull. My God, it's dull. It's so desperately dull and tedious and stuffy and boring and desperately dull.
I realize many classic family movies are leisurely paced by today's standards, but this entire first act seems calculated to send kids to sleep, or to tablet games. It's like a Universal Studios animal stunt show stretched beyond the point of tedium. There is a limited amount of entertainment value to be found in watching someone make noises at assorted wildlife, and it's not nearly enough to sustain this plot. The day gets a bit more eventful when local blowhard General Bellows turns up and accuses Dolittle of stealing a horse. Dolittle was doing no such thing, of course, he was just giving the creature some corrective lenses. So he's pretty angry at the accusation, and also that Bellows is about to go out fox hunting, what with the local vixen and her kits being loyal clients. Hilarity, or some kind of generic substitute thereof, ensues. The general is driven off, but his niece, one Emma Fairfax, calls Dolittle out for his appalling behavior towards people. This makes her the most sympathetic character thus far in my book, so it's inevitable that the movie will force her to reconsider that position, after properly humbling her.
It seems a man can be as rude as he likes, rude as he likes, lewd as he likes too.
Basically, all you need to know about Emma right now is she's one of those Victorian ladies who doesn't like being confined by Victorian ladydom and dreams of adventure. You know the type. Back at Casa Dolittle, a very large package has arrived.
It's a push me, pull you. Look.
Holy O'Reilly, forgive me.
The Panto Actors, excuse me, push me pull you, is a gift from a Native American colleague of Dolittle's who has sent the creature to help raise funds for Dolittle's sea snail quest. So Dolittle shops his new acquisition to nearby circus owner Andrew Blossom, who is so shocked by the animal that he bursts into song.
I give them what they want for just 2 bob, just 2 bob. Well, that's my job, but this is so fantastic, I can't wait to tell the wife.
I can't decide if Richard Attenborough is a better or worse singer than Rex Harrison. Probably better, since he seems to be able to convey an emotion other than smug. What I can decide, though, is this movie is really, really terrible at filming a chorus number. It's kind of hard to judge the choreography when so much is blocking the footwork. It's not so much a dance as it is chaotic gadding about. It's too busy, and you can't really tell what you're supposed to be focusing on in the frame. And much like everything else in this movie, it goes on much, much longer than it needs to. The circus's new attraction proves to be a big success, with only Emma and her extremely large hat being unimpressed. She takes Dolittle to task for exploiting his animal patients, but Matthew explains to her that she's misguided and the doctor is really a wonderful person.
I can't explain why he does what he does, but he does what he does because his heart is pure.
And if you believe that, I have a ski resort in the second circle to sell you. Meanwhile, Dolittle has noticed the circus's trained seal is a bit mopey. Turns out the seal, Sophie, is missing her husband and wants to rejoin him at the North Pole. Since Blossom is unlikely to give any of his animals PTO, this means Dolittle must smuggle her out to the sea. To do so, he disguises her as a baby in a carriage, then steals a cloak and bonnet from a traveling woman so he can smuggle her aboard a coach, then switches to a hay wagon when the coach gets stopped at a checkpoint, then convinces the horse to run away and take them to the seaside. All of this is much less interesting than it sounds.
There, Sophie, don't get upset. Can't bear females who cry.
Sophie, do me a favor and bite his nose off, please.
And it is no surprise to see the softness of the moon in your eyes, the gentle sparkle of the stars in the skies.
I mean, he does know she's a seal, right? And married? And also a seal? Unfortunately for Dolittle, a couple locals spot him hurling what looks like an old lady over a cliff, and his defense of, "No, really, I was helping a seal reunite with her husband," doesn't go over well at the inquest. So Dolittle proves his credentials as an animal polyglot to the court, which doesn't go over well with Magistrate Bellows.
For dinner last night, your lordship enjoyed the following: 2 helpings of boiled trout, 4 helpings of roast pheasant, with roast potatoes, Brussels sprouts and gravy, followed by 6 large portions of blackberry pie with whipped cream.
It's not true. I only had 5 helpings of blackberry pie.
Dolittle is acquitted of murder, but is found guilty of general acting like a crazy person and is committed to an asylum. The shocked Dolittle gives a defense of his actions that, well, it's not exactly To Kill a Mockingbird.
Why should we say treat him like a dog? Why should we say working like a horse? Why can't the English teach their children how to speak?
Given how Dolittle has treated humans so far, this part does come off as a tad hypocritical. Also, I kind of wonder how he copes with the part of his clientele that survive by eating his other clients. Needless to say, this little solo does not spare Dolittle from the nut house, meaning it's time for... By this time, Emma has warmed up to Dolittle, because of course she has, and since Matthew is planning on wrecking half the town to spring Dolittle from prison, this group could use an only sane woman. Luckily, Miss Polynesia has a better idea, namely getting Dolittle's chimp Chi-Chi to nab the paddy wagon keys and telling the horses to make a break for it. Now, why couldn't Dolittle have done that himself? I'm starting to think Miss Polynesia is the real brains of this outfit. The protagonists make their escape on the good ship Flounder, which looks like it was decorated by someone's grandmother, and Dolittle isn't too thrilled about the prospect of Emma tagging along because female creature, but she makes a mean seaweed pie, so he lets it stand for now. And since she's the only one who has pointed out that they don't really know where they're going, she gets to pick a destination on the map.
Sea Star Island. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, it's that floating island. It moves all over the world like a ship. It's a freak of nature.
And couldn't we go to Monte Carlo?
Yes, apparently the movie has suddenly decided Emma is materialistic and superficial, despite presenting no evidence to the contrary. Moreover, since she tells Dolittle that she expects no special treatment on the ship, he takes this as a cue to indulge in some Higgins-esque misogyny and force her to slave away doing everything on board. Is there a rule that every Rex Harrison movie needs a sequence where a woman is put through a humiliating ordeal? Sin number 6 for this part. It's like the movie decided Emma needed to be punished for the crime of not instantly liking Dolittle. So everybody futzes about for a bit while Dolittle talks to various sea animals. I swear I saw that octopus in Popeye. Until mercifully a storm comes along and introduces some action by sinking the ship. Not too much action, though, as the movie pauses so we can watch an old SeaWorld trick.
Thank you very much indeed.
Fortunately, the ship went down just off the coast of Sea Star Island itself, so the shipwrecked crew makes their way to land with only Emma unaccounted for.
I said all along a ship was no place for a woman. Heaven knows I did my best to make the voyage pleasant for her. Can't spend your life running after a woman, waiting on her hand and foot when there's important work to be done.
I'm sorry, I know it's an outdated trope, but I would dearly love to have Emma turn up being worshipped as a goddess by a local tribe who want to eat Dolittle or throw him into a volcano or something. But alas, she just made it to the island ahead of them and looks pretty tidy for someone who just crawled out of the sea.
However, that outfit that you're wearing this morning is the nicest thing I've seen you in since you left England.
This is my underwear.
I swear, every time I think this movie can't make me any more uncomfortable, it just lowers the bar.
Waiting for you to say you like me, or hate me, or miss me, or kiss me, or something.
Yes, for some reason the movie has decided to have some quasi-romantic tension between Emma and Dolittle, which doesn't fit either anything that's happened between them in the script or the complete lack of chemistry between the actors. They might as well be in separate movies for all the sparks they strike, and for Emma's sake, I wish they were.
And I think you like me too. Do you?
No, I think you're an asshole. But at this point, the generic island tribe puts in an appearance and captures our protagonists, and since Dolittle is a bit behind on human languages, he can only manage some basic pidgin to communicate with them.
Small boy, late for school. Here, very cold. They all go home puddled, yes?
What a funny accent.
The chief, William Shakespeare X, Willie for short, explains that his people are quite sophisticated, having picked up a bunch of culture from the remains of the shipwrecks that plague a roving island. I'm a bit conflicted on this plot point. On the one hand, it does feel like an honest attempt to subvert the old primitive natives harass our heroes plot. But on the other hand, apparently sophistication amounts to just adopting European culture rather than creating one of your own, and there's still a lot of ridiculous local superstitions that drive the remainder of the story. It was probably pretty progressive for 1967, but still, Wakanda this ain't. What I am not conflicted about is sin number 8, which is that the events from here on out are pretty random. See, Willie explains his people are suspicious of white folk, which seems less like superstition and more like a thorough understanding of human history, so they're holding Dolittle responsible for the fact that the storm has pushed the island too far north, and now all the local wildlife are suffering from colds. Luckily, this is a problem that happens to be in the Doc's wheelhouse. Using a network of local wildlife, Dolittle convinces some passing whales to push the island back southward. But alas, the shock causes a balancing rock to fall into a volcano. Don't ask me how a floating island has a volcano. So now, according to tribal law, Dolittle and his friends must be executed.
I once heard a story about a tribe that burned people alive and then ate them for dinner. I bet that's what they're going to do to us.
Sammons, will you please put a curb on your lurid imagination?
But random happenstance is there to solve everything, as the whale's push has managed to direct the island right back to the African mainland where it belongs.
He who brings back the lost island from the sea shall live as a god for 1,000 moons.
How convenient.
So Dolittle and company are set free, there is much rejoicing, Matthew gets another song about how wonderful the doctor is, and wasn't there a big sea snail that started this whole mess to begin with? Yep, it turns out the giant parade float, a sea snail, was hiding in a cave under the island this whole time. And despite its terrifying face, it's quite friendly and willing to take the protagonists back to England. But Dolittle stays behind because of that whole committed to an asylum thing. Besides, he's just not that good with the human relations deal, and he's not about to start now.
I'm all right with animals, but people, I'm not very good with. I never have been. I don't know why.
Must be that whole arrogant prick thing I've got going on. Dolittle is sad to see what amounts to his friends go, but the randomness isn't quite done yet. See, Sophie the seal, remember her? Stops by and explains that every animal in England has gone on strike unless Dolittle is acquitted of all charges. So, to prevent the UK from turning into Animal Farm, he hitches a ride home on a giant lunar moth, and the movie finally peters out.
I love every tale he tells me. I don't know any better once. Do you?
So much effort to so little purpose. Dr. Dolittle seems to be operating on the assumption that random encounters with various forms of wildlife is enough to sustain a 2.5-hour film, and it's not even close. Harrison makes for a rather unlikable protagonist, even more so when you know about his on-set antics, and the generally charming score can't make up for a plot where nothing really happens. Therefore, the Court of Musical Hell orders the following punishments. For the intolerably slow pacing, director Richard Fleischer is condemned to a long vacation in Delaware. For writing a love song to a seal, Leslie Bracus is condemned to listen to Rex Harrison sing all of his music. And for being a sanctimonious jerk about everything, Dr. Dolittle is condemned to an eternity of watching PETA propaganda. So let it be recorded. This session of the Infernal Court in Musical Hell is now adjourned.